If you are considering buying or selling this year, you will want to watch this episode. Look, there's a lot of conflicting dynamics that are happening in the real estate market that I think are going to take a lot of people by surprise. But before we dive into those, and specifically what's going on right here in the Midlands of South Carolina, the Lexington, Columbia, and Lake Murray area real estate market, we are going to talk about as well the hottest areas currently in the Midlands real estate market, some of them that you often mention to me, and others that may take you by surprise. But first, we have to talk about a couple things. We have to look at how we're trending versus the rest of the country, as well as the state in the real estate market. And even more importantly, where y'all are coming from and how you actually broke a record this year. That's right. So to get started, we have to see where we settled at in 2024 nationally to give you an idea. So U.S. existing home sales fell in 2024 0.73% from 2023 to the lowest level in 30 years. That's right, 4.06 million homes. Lowest since 1995. That's right. This is going past the '08 crash. And to give you an idea, since many of you do ask, all cash buyers made up 28% of the real estate sales across the country. The share of individual investors or second home buyers was 16%. Meanwhile, 31% of home buyers were first-time home buyers. So first-time home buyers are actually outpacing cash buyers and investors, despite what you may think or you may be reading online. Now, let's dive into statewide in South Carolina. We wrapped up with 88,363 closings. That's actually up 0.4% since 2023. So as a state, we are outpacing the national average. Columbia specifically, we saw 13,152 closings, which is up 3.1% compared to 2023. So we're tracking not only ahead of the nation, but ahead of the state as well. So that's why I tell people these hyper-local reports are more important than, some of these agents over in Florida or Texas that you share with me, because their market may look significantly different than ours due to these discrepancies. Now, to give you an idea, how has this year actually started off? So in January, we started the year at 737 closings in our local market, which is actually down 1.2% compared to last year at the same time. With that said, pendings across the area are up 2%. And I know I've prior mentioned, I see this more indicative of what is currently happening, where closings are in the past. And talking about closings further, when we look hyper-local, Lexington closings in January are down 23.9% since last year at the same time. Irmo had 32% more closings. Northeast Columbia had 5.8% more closed sales. Lake Murray is down 50% on the Irmo and Chapin side and down 60% on the Lexington side. Now, on Lake Murray, these overall numbers are small numbers, but it's still a big change. So again, there's a lot of discrepancies across the board, but surprising enough, they're not actually relative to what pricing has done, which we will dive into shortly and may surprise you based off of what I just told you. And to give you an idea, since many ask, when we pull up current pending sales right now, about 35% of the pendings are new construction. And later on, we'll talk about the inventory of new construction out there versus the resales to see if it's relative to the inventory. Now, keep in mind, we are a top relocation state, which is why I think a lot of these dynamics are happening, which brings me to the record that y'all broke. That's right. U-Haul every year puts out this list of where they see there's moving trucks going to and from. And this year, South Carolina topped the list, making the #1 spot, beating out Texas and Florida for the first time. To give you an idea, last year we took 4th, adding North Carolina in the 3rd place position. Now, with this said, I've honestly helped multiple people from Florida and Texas due to the rising insurance in Florida and rising property taxes in Texas. Some of you watching this may be from those areas. And recently I've started to hear more North Carolina with their rising prices. Again, we'll talk about current pricing locally and what it's doing in our areas. But first, let's see where you all are coming from, right? Because you all's kind of just a generic information. But according to Redfin, Let's start statewide and then we'll dive locally because there are some differences. Statewide in South Carolina, number one place people are coming from is Los Angeles, California. Number two is New York, New York. 3, San Francisco, California. 4, Seattle, Washington. 5, Washington, D.C. 6, Chicago, Illinois. 7, Philadelphia, PA. 8, Boston, Massachusetts. 9, Denver, Colorado. And 10, Dallas, Texas. Now, Columbia specifically, it was slightly different than the state. And it's always odd to me as well. Los Angeles, while it tops the state's list, when you look at our area, Greenville, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Rock Hill, the main popular areas I hear about, Los Angeles doesn't top their list. So I don't know if they're just kind of more spread out looking in different areas, if they're diving into some rural county that I'm missing or what. Now, keep in mind, Redfin is also based on home searches. And I know talking to many Californians, they're considering a multitude of areas. So they may just be driving up the searches into different areas. Again, that's where I'm originally from. So I get it. Either way, locally, where we saw people coming from. Number 1, New York, New York. 2, Washington, D.C. Charlotte, North Carolina, Los Angeles, California, Charleston, South Carolina, Boston, Massachusetts, Miami, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Philadelphia, PA, and Chicago, Illinois. And what else is interesting about this list, I felt more people in Maryland and Virginia bordering Washington, D.C. than per se Washington, D.C. itself. But safe to say, I've helped people from every other state and area on this list. So I am responsive for some of these numbers. Either way, leave a comment to let me know where you're specifically coming from. With that said, I recently did do a comparison video of Pennsylvania versus the Columbia area. If you haven't caught it, you'll want to check that out if that's where you're coming from. And I've done in the past as well, and you can search through my videos and find these: Florida versus California versus New York, Charleston, Greenville, Myrtle Beach, and I have plans in the future to hit North Carolina and Arizona. And I know Arizona didn't make the list, but I personally helped numerous people from Arizona, and I get more and more calls every single day from Arizona. Again, leave me a comment if you want to add another area to that list, and don't hesitate to reach out if you are considering a move. Now, with that said, it begs the question, are listings keeping up with this demand from the influx of people from other area, as well as the listings that we saw? So, new listings overall are up 8% year over year. Locally, in Lexington, new listings are down 1%. And later we will talk about that percentage in new construction when it comes to the inventory. Irmo, listings were up 11.6%. Keep in mind with that, they have less new construction, so it's not as big of a factor in the area. Northeast Columbia, new listings are down 4%. Elgin, new listings are down a whopping 48.4%. Lake Murray on the Irmo and Chapin side, new listings are up 240%. New listings are up 150% in Lexington. Again, don't read too much into that because we will talk about pricing in just a bit. And again, remember, these are small numbers this early in the year on the lake. Now, what did those numbers do to the inventory in the area now that we've broken down the new listings, the closings? Either way, overall inventory is at 2,893, up 28% year over year. New construction is 27% of the market share. And if you recall, 35% of the pendings were new construction. So it seems like new construction is selling faster than they can build. Now, I said before, pre-pandemic, overall, we are above 3,000 homes. And it seems like we're still just stuck below that. And looking at my active tracker on my website right now, we're still stuck right here in February below that 3,000 mark. Now, a lot of the reason is going back during the pandemic boom, we dipped below 1,000 homes. So we're just trying to recover from that. And circling back as well, back in 2023, new construction homes, we only had 693 new construction homes out there, which at that time was actually closer to 40% of the market share. Resales were simply very low relative to where we are today. So while we've seen a spike in resales since then, new construction hasn't even risen by 100 homes since then. So again, while I know, and I personally feel like it from time to time, that new construction is dominating the market on every single corner. It feels like they're building. Again, I get it. They're not outbuilding faster than the current market demand. Now, Circling back, new listings are currently outpacing pendings. So it may shift in the future where this year we crest back over 3,000 homes. But because of what I just told you with new construction, it simply seems like it's just going to make the resales to continue to have more options and more homes sitting. But we'll talk about that in just a second here, because this is not the same in all areas I know that you are looking. And while the rising inventory overall, it's not a good indicator of what you may experience in the market, right? To give an idea, Lexington's inventory is only up 4%. New construction is 35% of their inventory. Irmo's inventory is up 27.7%, and less than 10% of their inventory is new construction, so it's not really a factor there. Northeast Columbia's inventory is up 35.8%. 33% of their inventory is new. Elgin inventory is actually down 2%, and 32% of their inventory is new. So all the areas but Northeast Columbia have less inventory than the market average. Again, hence why I share the local areas. And keep in mind, both Lexington and Elgin are significantly lacking and obviously not getting better with their drops in new listings, which will make the next section make sense and hopefully answer the question many of you have. Lastly, Lake Murray is up 109.5% with their inventory in Irmo and Chapin and 55.6% in the Lexington side. Again, don't read too much into it because now we're going to dive into pricing. So average and median pricing overall. Median, we're talking about 268,000, up 3.9% since last year. And the average is up 7% to 310,000. Now, the interesting thing, diving into this further, is last year the median dropped 14,000 from December to January. Where if you look this year, it only dropped 4,000. And the average last year dropped 11,000 from December to January. This year, it only dropped 5,000. So is this cluing us into faster rising prices this year? Possibly. But we're going to have to keep an eye on this to see if it keeps the same pace. Now, let's dive into the local areas as well, because this is where it's going to kind of break apart a bit more. So Lexington, their pricing is up 6.6% on the median, where if you remember across the board, the median was only up 3.9%. Irmo's up 2.1%. Northeast Columbia is down 0.7%, and Elgin is up 7.9%. Again, thinking back, Elgin and Lexington being the highest increase, that is where the lack of inventory was. And so that is what is still impacting pricing. So again, hopefully that answers the question of why am I seeing more days on market, more inventory, more price drops, but prices keep rising? Because hyperlocal goes beyond just the Columbia metro area, and it dives into the specific suburbs that many of you are looking at. I know I hear the same common suburbs call after call, which is why I share the primary ones I hear about. There are a few, don't get me wrong, that venture into other areas. Again, I'm only one team in the market, but the numbers do align with what I'm personally seeing. And to give you an idea, overall, currently, active new construction at the start of the month, their average price was at $345,000. But to give you an idea, we've seen them range from about $200,000 for a townhome, low 200s for single family, up to over $1 million in some exclusive neighborhoods and on Lake Murray. Now, with that said, going back, we do have to hit another area I hear about and show often, Lake Murray. So starting with the Irmo and Chapin side, their pricing is up 21.3%. Lexington side up 65.3%. Now, again, this is only based on 2 houses in Lexington and 3 houses in Chapin. So I'm not going to read too deep into that personally. We'll just keep an eye on it as we see the inventory jump in as well. But I've always said with the lake, there's a built-in supply and demand because you can only build so many homes on the water. Now, before we do circle back around to what areas are most competitive and my experience this past month with multiple offers, let's dive into Redfin's top 10 metros in South Carolina with the fastest growing sales price, which is not identical to the most competitive that we will talk about. So number one is Anderson in January, up 48.6%, followed by Goose Creek, up 20%, Simpsonville, up 13.6%, Spartanburg, up 11.5%. Number five, Columbia, South Carolina, up 8.6%, beating out all of Charleston's area except for the Goose Creek area, right? Because continuing on, North Charleston up 8.5%, Mount Pleasant up 7.1%, Somerville up 7.1%, Hilton Head up 6.6%, and Rock Hill up 5%. Now, I'm not sure if we're seeing a shift in movement. We know Greenville has been topping these lists as top areas for quite some time. Or is it just that those bottom five are the most expensive, so that interest rate wall has been hit in some of those areas with affordability? But it's something we'll have to keep an eye on as time progresses. Now, with that said, in the month of January, I had more than one client that ran into multiple offer situations. That's right here in January. Now, the surprising thing about it, because any of you that have watched me for a while know that it's not uncommon for this to happen in the fall and winter on occasion. Not only was it in the resale world, but also in new construction. And I know if you've been watching for a while, I've talked about in the past, a lot of my clients do revert to new construction after running into multiple offers in the resale world because they just don't want to deal with that. And so when it happened in new construction here in January, it was a little bit of a surprise to me. And with that said, I also had two different clients. I showed two different houses in the Chapin area. And one of them, to be 100% honest, was okay. Needed a little bit of love from my client's opinion. The moment we finished showing, the agent called me and said, hey, just want to give you a heads up. We got an offer on the house on one of them either the day before or that morning, and the sellers were trying to make a decision. My buyers did not elect to dive into the multi-offer situation. And I did verify that those houses went under contract, so the agent wasn't lying to me. But it gives you the idea that a competitive that we are starting to see pick up in some of these areas. And I know with that said, I didn't dive into Chapin earlier. And of course, there's other areas that you may be interested in. Don't hesitate to reach out if you are considering another area and want to know what the dynamics look like there. But Chapin, because I do get people that ask about it, they did see an 8.5% increase in their median price, so above the market average. And they had a 26.9% increase in inventory, which was slightly below the market average. And in the end of the day, both of those buyers that ran into multi-offers did end up going with new construction. All right, let's find out. Are my experiences aligned with the market average? And are we in a stronger seller's market? And then we'll talk about the hottest areas in the Midlands of South Carolina. So overall, the monthly supply of inventory is 2.6 months. And for those first time watching, 6 months is we as agents consider an average market. When you have more than 6 months worth of inventory, that's when you're in your buyer's market. When you have less than 6 months is when you're in that seller's market. So while yes, it is still considered a competitive seller's market, it's not as competitive as we saw in the months prior. But do recall, the inventory was quite different in areas such as Lexington, Elgin, and others. And to give you an idea, both of those multi-offers I talked about in resale and new construction were in the Lexington area as well. I've talked about numerous times the discrepancies in the turnkey and not turnkey. I mean, I have literally showed multiple clients the same house week after week. Both rejected them due to their condition. Both of them later running into those multiple offers on another house in the same exact area, sometimes just a neighborhood away. And that is something critical to realize if you're a seller in this market. If your house is sitting on the market and your neighbor is in a multi-offer, it might not be your agent. I know that's the first person everyone loves to blame, but it might be time to realize it's your price or it's the condition of your house. Look, it's no longer 2021 where every house is gonna get a multi-offer just because there's no houses out there. You've seen statistically, there's more inventory out there, which means more options for buyers. But because it is still a strong seller's market, again, the ones that are turnkey, priced right, are the ones that we're seeing the competitiveness in. Now, let's circle back to Redfin and their top 10 most competitive cities in South Carolina to give you an idea. And yes, a lot of these are right here in the Midlands of South Carolina. Number one on their list, Gaston, South Carolina. For those not familiar, this is going to be South Lexington, rural South Lexington, even past the Red Bank area, bordering on that West Columbia side. It's rural, but it's expanding a lot, and we're seeing a lot more new construction out that direction. Leslie, South Carolina, which is going to be up in the Rock Hill area. Woodfield, South Carolina. This is actually going to be somewhat in the Columbia area before you truly get into Northeast Columbia. Red Bank, South Carolina. Many of you talked to me about this area, right? South part of Lexington, where the Bluefield, Copper Crest, Ashton Lakes, Longview neighborhoods are. Sans Souci, South Carolina, if I'm pronouncing that right. It's going to be up in Greenville. Oak Grove, South Carolina. Another area I've had clients buy in as well. This is going to be heading towards West Columbia, but it's still going to be zoned for the River Bluff Lexington 1 High School. It's kind of a little bit of an older, established area, some new, but not much of it because there's just not as much room for it. Capitol View, this is going to be over in Southeast Columbia. I actually recently did a driving tour where I drove by this area. Again, kind of more older, established area. Irmo, South Carolina. Again, older, established area I talk about a lot, done a ton of videos about, and a ton of you ask me about. Duncan, South Carolina. This is going to be between Greenville and Spartanburg, and Travelers Rest rounding out the list over in Greenville. Now, my opinion locally, this has everything to do with the proximity and price point. I mean, if you followed me for any time, you know this about those areas. And they have that more competitive price point versus per se Chapin. The north side of Lexington closer to the lake, Blythewood, and some of the other areas that have a little bit higher price. So the question remains, do those areas continue to see growth? Now, personally, I for sure foresee it in the Red Bank and Irmo area. These have been on these lists for quite some time locally, as many of you reach out and ask. Gaston, I can foresee it, but I think it's going to take some time. Again, it's a very rural area, but we're seeing a lot of new construction out there, and your money goes a little bit further is why people are going that way. But I think it's going to take some time to fill in those gaps. I have had clients buy out that way, so it is happening, but we'll see how fast it happens. Oak Grove, it's always stayed consistent because, again, the price point, while still being zoned for River Bluff High School and that proximity. Again, money going a little bit further, as I clued you in on. Capitol View and Woodfield, I just personally haven't seen it. I've had people ask about Capitol View, but didn't end up choosing that area. Again, I'm just one guy, one team in the market. I talk about in other videos how most of my buyers in the relocation world are buying in the suburbs and not as close to downtown Columbia as those area. So take that with a grain of salt. But stay subscribed because the market is tough to keep up with. I know shouting doom and gloom gets more clicks, likes, and followers, trust me, but my goal is to shoot it straight, even if it gets me less views. So at least that way you can stay informed and make the right decision for your family. Plus, for the last 5 years, those shouting it's going to crash will 1 month see a dip in pricing, and everyone will say, see, they were right, Brandon, but they'll ignore the fact that we were right the other 99% of the time. I digress. Go watch this video to learn more about the areas I spoke about to see if Columbia, Lexington, and Lake Murray area is right for you. I don't know why I entertain the comment section, but I guess to me it feels more like a community. But thanks for watching either way.